This is the Deaf Blind Potter Show, and my name is Kelvin Crosby, and I am the Deaf Blind Potter. And if you're here to live beyond your challenges, you're at the right spot. So let's go on this journey and live beyond our challenges. Hey, so good to see you, even though I can't see you. It's another beautiful day in the neighborhood, and I'm so excited that you are here at the Deaf Blind Potter Show. I'm Kelvin Crosby, also known as the Deaf Blind Potter, and today we're going on a journey today, and we're going to make a really cool vase today, and that's the goal. We're going to make it pretty tall, kind of get a nice little kind of water pitcher, because today's story is totally about finding people to help those to overcome challenges in their country. And what's amazing about today's story is over 100,000 people were murdered. And when we get to the details of today's story, you're going to realize why they were murdered and why this is so important that we need to get behind. And what is this month? Is tithing. And this is one way and that you can, obviously you got to tithe to your local church, but this is a way you can give to missions and have this as a part of your living beyond your challenge philosophy, and really allowing God to help you live through challenges for your tithing and your giving and everything like that. So let me not hold you from anymore from today's guest. Randy Jumper, welcome to the Deaf Blind Potter Show, man.
Hey, my privilege, my honor. So glad to be able to be on this radio show with you today.
Thank you, man. And I really want to first, honestly, I've never heard this story of yours before we dive into the meat of today's show. What is your salvation story? Like, how did you find Christ?
Yeah, sure. I'm a little bit about me. I'm, like we've known before, I'm pastor here at First Assembly of God in North Little Rock, Arkansas, working with missions, young adults and college kids. I grew up in church. My mom and dad were super involved, super active. I was the church kid. I think we were the last people to leave some weekends. Then I was there on Saturday. I remember the first time I mowed the yard of the church when I was a kid. My dad took me, and when it was done, I said, how much money do I get paid to mow the churchyard? And my dad just looked at me and said, no, son, this is what we do. I grew up church, grew up that way. My dad was on the board. My mom was involved in kid ministry. Knew at an early age that I wanted to do something with my life, and I knew that the Lord had put his hand on call on my life to do that. And so even as a kid, I was people like, what do you want to do when you grow up? I'm like, well, I want to be a missionary, because that's what the cool church kids do. I think it sounded awesome. And thought, hey, here I am, send me. Everybody's like, don't be a missionary. I was like, here I am. I want to be a missionary. I'm ready to go. Send me somewhere dark and hairy and scary. As that call played out over the course of my life, got into high school, middle school, junior high, those eras, and not like today's world where you can, social media and podcasts and Instagram and all those worlds. I lived in a small little town in Arkansas, and my church that I went to was in the city in the middle of the state, 30 minutes apart, and 30 minutes back then might have been 1,000 miles, because my church world and my school world never ever connected each other. So I could live a dual life. And so Sunday, everybody loved me because I was the front row church kid that mowed the yard for free. But then on the weekend or during the week, I was life of the party, having fun, doing my own thing. I wasn't horrible. I wasn't selling drugs, knocking over liquor stores, but I was definitely living for myself. Yeah. Had my own agenda, and I lived in terror and fear that those two worlds would collide, that my church family would find out about my real world and that my real world would find out about my spirituality. And so I kind of played that double life for all the way through up into college. I even went to Bible school. I mean, like,
Wow.
I was going to Bible school, seminary, doing my thing. I knew how to do it well. And then, I just had a moment with the Lord where I realized this was not this double life, this double standard wasn't going to work for me. People ask, would you have gone to heaven or hell? Were you saved or unsaved? I'm not sure. I'm not sure I know the math and all that. I know this until that moment, I didn't have a sincere, deep commitment to the Lord. That
Yeah.
it was more about what I could get out of Jesus more than what I could surrender to Him.
So tell us a little bit about that moment where God said, Randy, don't live this double life. Don't be lukewarm. And I want you to follow my call for your life.
Sure.
Kind of tell us that, like, what was that encounter?
Well, like most people, when you have that moment, when you're living a double life, the stress and the anxiety becomes overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And even, in the Bible college setting, learning scripture and theology by day, living for your own world by night, it's exhausting, it's terrifying, it's anxiety filled. And I got to a point where I no longer couldn't manage it anymore.
Yeah.
And so what happened is when I used to be able to partition my life out and keep control, I could keep the two groups at bay, but because of it became overwhelming. That's what sin does. Sin consumes. It's not happy with being in the background. It wants to take you out front.
Yep.
And so I got to a point where I made some really poor choices. My judgment was bad, but I still got away with them. Like nobody quote unquote knew. It was just me and the Lord. And then months later, the guilt and condemnation of all that, this Holy Spirit speaking to me and saying, hey, I want you to do something with your life. God's saying, I have a plan for you, but you can't do it this way.
Yeah.
And very clearly, I remember the moment where I said, this has to be a change in the way of my purpose, direction, and work from there.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of when I was addicted to pornography and how God really took me and really addressed that issue. I mean, and said, I need you to fix this issue and really fall in love with me in a different way. And because for me, that moment was so impactful, I realized this was going to change my life. If I decided to give up porn and embrace what God has. Stay tuned, because you're going to be wondering, how did 100,000 people die in 1 year? See you on the other side. Have you ever wondered, without your vision, how you would cross the street? I am the deaf blind potter. I've been hit by a car 3 times in my life. It's said that 87 million people in this world will have the same experience as I have. But I started working on a solution to help solve this problem of blind individuals from getting hit by a car. It's not a perfect solution, but it's a solution that allows you to see me from 100 yards away. It's called the See Me cane, the lighted blind cane. The See Me cane is simple to use. It has an on and off button, a vibration button that tells you that the light is on or off, and has magnetic charging on the top. And it feels just like a normal blind cane. I need your help to donate to the See Me cane, so that way those that are visually impaired can get a See Me cane and live beyond their challenges. Go to seemecane.com to donate today. Like I always say, go live beyond your challenges. It's Calvin, and you're here at the Deaf Blind Potter Show, and you're probably wondering, where am I at on the pottery piece? Because this is a radio show. I have centered the piece. I have not made it yet. It's definitely a little bit wider than I make most of my radio show pieces. And so we're going to start with this and see how this comes out to be a water pitcher, or really more of a water catcher. That's kind of the goal we're going for today. And I tell you, I am so excited about today's guest. Today's guest is Randy Jumper, and he's one of the pastors at Little Rock Assembly of God Church. And I'm excited to have him talk about a story with you, because we just heard his salvation story and how he really had to have that moment with God and say, I got to have a change in my life. And now we're going to dive into kind of people from, well, I'm going to do this right, Rwanda.
Yeah, that's right. Well done,
Yeah,
Wanda.
I'm
Yeah.
getting there. And me as a deaf person, that I can't hear my own voice.
Yeah.
And so it's a very difficult thing for me to say words that don't make sense in my mouth.
Sure.
So I'm overcoming, right? We're living beyond our challenges. And so I'm going to have Randy to kind of take us through the commercial, the story of what's happening in Rwanda. And I want him to kind of just really give us the details of the war and how people were. I don't know all the details, but I'm excited to hear it. So, Randy, kind of take us through that journey and kind of paint the picture for us of what this looks like. And I'm hoping I can do it justice by making the piece on the wheel. So, kind of tell us that story.
Yeah. So the nation of Rwanda they call it the heart of Africa. It's smack dab in the middle of the continent. The nation of Rwanda has been through a horrific story. I'm not sure anyone knows exactly all the statistics, the data. You'll hear different people do different numbers, and so I'll share you what I've learned, what they've shared with me. But it is a story of tragedy and sadness at the same time, an absolutely spectacular story of how a people group and how individuals decided to allow their lives to be transformed and changed. The Rwandans, the nation is a group of spectacular people who, for centuries, lived together peacefully and in harmony, and the Europeans came and colonized Africa, and a part of their control methods that were done at the time, one of the theories and practices put to subjugate people was they would introduce class and racism into a culture. And so in the 1930s, roughly the 1930s, the Belgian government, to control Rwanda, the Belgians were in control. It was a colony that they had taken over. And to help control the populace, they introduced racism and classism to the country. Up until this point, there really hadn't been any issues. But they introduced three people groups, meaning they literally fabricated people groups out of the air and assigned a class. They created Hutus, Tutsis, and Twa. Now the Twa are a small pygmy group, relatively small, that lives out in the jungle. So the Twa become in the story, but not a whole lot. But basically Hutus and Tutsis. And what the Belgian government would do is they would create these two different classes of people, Hutus and Tutsis, and then they would systemically put them against each other over decades. They would create false stories, false narratives to make Tutsis hate Hutus and Hutus to hate Tutsis. Now I'm crystallizing and summarizing 50, 60, 70 years of history into this moment, in that the Tutsis were typically the affluent, typically the educated, and they were the small minority group. The Hutus were typically the less educated, more middle class, low class of society, and they were the majority. There were more Hutus than there were Tutsis. Belgians put Tutsis in leadership and government, and kind of told them, you are better than the Hutus. But then at the same time, they were indoctrinating Hutus and saying, look, all the atrocities and difficulties happening in Rwanda are not because of us, the Belgians, we're the good guys. It's those evil, nasty Tutsis who are the ones who are making all the deal. They called them cockroaches.
Wow.
Um, and they spent decades creating this conflict. They manufactured a conflict out of nowhere. They literally, the Belgians who had been conquered by the Nazi regime, the people who had been subjugated by Hitler and Nazism, actually copied SS practices and Nazi practices and incorporated them into the way that they worked in Rwanda.
So
The
just a quick clarifier. What year are we talking about right now? Because it seems like this is pretty modern from what you're talking about.
Sure, this would have been 1930 through about think 1930s all the way up to about the 1980s. So I'm
Okay.
summarizing 60 years.
Okay.
During that time, the Hutus overthrew the Tutsis. They said they kind of reacted on it, and so there's this back and forth government. And all things being equal, Tutsis and Hutus were creating conflict. There was back and forth violence. There was difficulty. But ultimately, the Tutsis who had been in control were removed. The Hutus were put in place. And hundreds of thousands of Tutsis had to flee the country. There are all kinds of stories, people who are, mass killings, those kinds of things. The genocide took place over the course of decades. But basically, a couple 100,000 Tutsis flee the country, and they're living in Congo, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda. But the world is trying to create, the United Nations is trying to create peace. They're trying to reconcile what's going on. There are these Hutu government, Tutsi governments. And that brings us all the way to April 6th, 1994. So April 6th, 1994. The president of Rwanda and the president of Burundi, both of them were Hutu men at this point. They had gone to a peace summit to try to bring peace and stability between the Hutus and Tutsis. No one knows exactly what happened, but on their plane ride back from this peace summit, someone shot a missile and down and killed the president of Burundi and the president of Rwanda, both Hutu men. The Hutus said the Tutsis have launched a war against us. And they announced over the radio that it was time to kill the cockroaches.
Oh boy.
And so for the last couple years, all throughout the country, all around the region, they had stockpiled machetes and weapons, and a national genocide began overnight. And for 100 days, somewhere between 800,000 and 1 million people were slaughtered. So 100,000 people in a matter of moments were killed, and over 1 million people killed in the matter of days. And it's hard for us to wrap our minds around, because
Yeah.
if you remember, Hutus and Tutsis were they're less than 100 years old at this point. This isn't like people these are people who were related to each other. These were people who were next door neighbors with each other. These were people who went to work with each other. And the word went over the radio, it's time to kill the cockroaches. And so what would happen is, if you lived in an apartment complex or you lived on a street, everyone knew who the Tutsis were on your street. The group would band together. You would walk in and you would machete to death all of the Tutsis who were there. There'd been some conflicts up to this point. This had happened. There'd been some conflict, like I said, some violence, and up until that moment, Tutsis would flee, and you would run to church. So the churches, Catholic churches, evangelical churches, Presbyterian, had always been sort of safe harbors. If you could get to the church, you would be okay. You just have to let it ride out. This time it changed.
Yeah.
I've been to the couple Catholic churches, one of it, Nyamata, for example. where 50,000 people were killed inside the church.
Wow. Wow.
Absolutely insane. And to the point where, I've met survivors. I've heard them tell stories that, like they were kids, they were teenagers, and they'd be at dinner with their neighbors, their neighbor who was in business with their father. They'd been lifelong friends. As kids, the kids played together. They had dinner together. They went to bed that night. Their parents woke them up because the man who had dinner with them and had been a business partner with their dad for their whole lives was now raping and killing their mother. And absolutely mind-boggling, the stories that have come out of the Rwandan genocide.
So, kind of tell me. So the genocide happened, but I'm assuming this didn't solve any problems, or did it actually solve a problem, but in a very different way?
No, it created more problems than it solved. And so the tragedy was the world watched as all this happened and did nothing. In fact, the United Nations, governments in Europe had soldiers and had bases set up, and some of them even saw this coming and did nothing. In the neighboring country of Congo, which was affected by it as well, it wasn't just one nation. All the nations in the region happened. I was in Kisangani, Congo, a couple years ago, and they tell the story where the United Nations soldiers are standing there on the wall of their compound, their fort, guns out, and Tutsis are running for their lives, being chased by other men with machetes, holding their children, and they're running to the gates, begging to be let in, but because the world said no, and the United Nations said we can't intervene, they watched as small children were macheted to death in front of them and did nothing.
Wow.
So what happened was there came a point about 100 days into it that the world responded with something has to give. There's a famous Time magazine cover in May 16th. The cover of Time magazine, the quote says, "There are no devils left in hell. They all live in Rwanda." Wow. And the world sort of came around. The Tutsis that had lived outside, that had been external, the ones who had escaped to Tanzania and Uganda and Congo, they kind of rallied together with some help from the rest of the world, and they brought soldiers to stop the killing. Like, Kevin, it's hard to even imagine, to the point where whole villages were gone. When I say whole villages, I'm talking about villages of 25, 50,000 people, where they murdered everyone who was there, burned everything to the ground, and then left it. When it was such a tragic situation that by the time the West came in to help clean up, like, for example, they had to exterminate all dogs that were there because there were so many dead bodies in the streets that the animals had gone feral and had learned to eat human flesh. And it was a chaotic war zone.
Well, stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to start seeing how the healing starts happening. But I want to tell you, it's not going to be an easy journey, because it's going to be quite surprising how long it's going to take to get us to this point. So we'll see you on the other side. Jamie Kane's show is here, everybody. And you got to check it out at the YouTube. And it's See Me Kane. And you go there, you can check out weekly how I'm making the See Me Kane version 4. As well, you get to hear interviews from people that bought their See Me Canes and how it changed their lives. As well, one of the coolest parts of the show, it is Light Up the Blind moment, where I interview individuals with visual impairment that are doing cool things and spotlighting what they're doing and how they're living beyond their challenges. And at the end, I share a little bit of news on what's happening with the See Me Cane, things that you can get involved in, and how things are working. The See Me Cane show is all about inspiring people to live beyond their challenges, as well how you to see me develop my invention, the See Me Cane. So go to YouTube, and there'll be a link in the description down below to go to the channel as well. It's See Me Cane. Like I always say, go live beyond your challenges, and I'll just see you in a second. Hey, it's Calvin here. It's the Deaf Blind Potter Show, and I am the Deaf Blind Potter. We're at the bottom of the hour. We're going to work our way up the hour. And if you know the Deaf Blind Potter Show, I'm always making a pottery piece while I interview my guests about their living beyond the challenge story, or they're helping a country live beyond their challenges, or other things like that. And so you're probably wondering where my piece is at. So we have, what would you say, Randy? How high do you think this is?
Oh, it's at least 2 feet, 2.5 feet.
Yeah, it's at least, yeah, maybe 1.5.
Yeah.
To 2 feet, if you're a true potter, you know that's the max that you can throw on a potter wheel is 2 feet. Right. You can almost make it up to 1.5 or 2.5 feet, but it's not. You gotta have 4 hands to make that happen. But yeah, so it's a cylinder right now, and I'm gonna clean up the top, and I'm gonna make it into a water jug, and so we're getting there. But we just heard the story about Rwanda and the genocide that happened there. It's honestly, this is a dark secret that was never talked about. I mean, I just learned about this a couple weeks ago, and I'm realizing we need to bring awareness to this issue. This is history that's not being talked about. This is a country that really was divided by Europeans. And don't get me started on what's happening now with going on in Israel. But I'm just telling you, we need to keep our eyes open to understand what's going on. So let's open our eyes, everybody. I'll try to open my eyes, even though I can't see, but we'll do my best. But so now, Randy, we've heard the story and about what happened in Rwanda, and kind of tell us now, how did Rwanda start healing, or is it still healing?
Yeah. So what happened next is an interesting sort of response to the whole genocide. Obviously, the whole nation is in conflict and turmoil. In a matter of moments, you go from friends and family to now victims and perpetrators. And Tutsis come back in from around the world. They help push out the Hutu rebels. But at the same time, you have a lot of people who just were everyday normal people. They were Hutus. They were caught as well. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, if you were like, I don't want to kill people. I don't want to murder my neighbors. But then what would happen is rebels would come into your home and they'd say, all right, here's your choice. You either murder your neighbor, you rape his children, or we are going to cut off your hands, and then we are going to systematically dismember your children and your wife in front of you until we'll kill you last after watching it happen. And so Hutus, even just the normal everyday people, didn't know what to do or how to work it. Others collaborated and helped and hid people, and to the point, for example, one of my good friends, her name was Christine. They kind of knew something was happening. Christine's husband and 2 small children fled the country just before the genocide happened. But she was stuck in the country. She was back in Rwanda, while her husband and children were in another country for 6 to 8 weeks. They had no idea whether or not Christine was alive or dead. They just knew what was taking place. So anyway, you come back to this moment where the evil rebels are pushed out, and the decision to rebuild Rwanda. And the decision was made that they would be a nation of forgiveness and reconciliation rather than a nation of retribution. And so there are these amazing stories. My friend Jean Marie, who's a pastor there, Jean Marie had to hide in the jungle as they were hunting him, calling his name, hunting him, trying to kill him. They killed his two of his siblings. Other members of his family died, but Jean Marie survives hiding out in the woods at the end of the genocide, comes back, and he's part of the rebuilding process. And he walks into he's the pastor of the church. He walks into the community on a day where everyone's called together, and he reads a letter to the whole community, knowing that men and women who were in front of him were people who had killed his own brother and sister. He reads a letter of forgiveness and says, I forgive you for what you've done, and the only way we can move forward is for us to reconcile. And this is what happens. Across the country, people are held accountable and responsible for what they did wrong. They didn't get a free pass for evil, but everyone committed to work together to rebuild, to never let this happen again. And so they began to rebuild the country. Pastor Christine and Jean-Marie were part of individuals who helped relaunch the Assemblies of God Church there. They started making church happen. Jean-Marie, his church strategy was the only way we can heal is if we force Hutus and Tutsis to work together. So for months, they didn't meet in a big congregation. They met in small groups. And he picked who was in what small group. So he would assign Hutus and Tutsis together in the same group and force them to eat together and pray together and study the Bible together to help rebuild reconciliation. They decided, through the help of the United Nations, the United States, Europe, other countries of the world came alongside and helped them and assisted them, and they've rebuilt the country. And they've decided they want to never do this again. And so the country is an incredible place of beauty. It's a place of history. It's interesting. You would think if any of your listeners know anything about shame cultures, which are typically African, that the shame culture is you don't want anyone to know anything bad. You hide it. Imperfections you don't show. It's the exact opposite in Rwanda. Everywhere you go, there's a genocide memorial. There's a plaque. They tell the story. They don't want anyone to forget what's happened. They want everyone to know what took place so that it will not happen again. And the genocide memorials are very moving. Everyone has a connection somehow to someone who was killed or was part of the killing. At the same time, they're moving forward. The buildings, the construction that is taking place. Now we are some 30 years later. The country is growing. The people are beautiful. They're working together to establish a new era for Rwanda. What an inspiring story of reconciliation, forgiveness, and transformation, that out of the horrors of the evil that are there, these people are being redeemed. They are redeeming their time and transforming their community and their country.
Well, I think that's what's so amazing about this whole story, and what I wish we could do this in America. I mean, there are times where I'm like, we need to do this. We need to have a moment to forgive each other and come to the cross and have Christ be a part of this journey with us. Sure. But stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Bible college that's being built there and how Randy's heavily involved in this whole process. See you on the other side. I want to tell you about deafblindpotter.com. Well, where are you going to get there when you arrive? You're going to see me, and you're also going to have the experience of all the pottery behind me, the pottery that's in the kiln, all of those experiences where you're going to see mugs, you're going to see heart bowls, you're going to see vases, you're going to see pots, you're going to see bowls. And you can go ahead and purchase it there, and I'm going to get it to you as soon as I can, so that way you can have the experience of feeling the tactile experience of a deaf-blind potter piece. Did you know those three rings on every piece of mine? The first ring represents joy. The second ring represents the perseverance that you're going to have to face in your life. And third is the character that you have to build when you find joy in your pain. And the whole piece is your hope to keep moving forward. Like I always say, go live beyond the challenges, because that's exactly what I want you to do when you have the tactile experience, when you feel a deafblind Potter piece. So go to deafblindpotter.com and get your deafblind Potter pieces today. And while you're there, if you want a shirt, hat, or hoodie, you can also get Deafblind Potter merch there as well. Like I always say, go live beyond your challenges, and I'll see you just in a second. It's Kelvin here, the Deafblind Potter, and I tell you, this has been a really fun show because I tell you, this story, I don't think any of us heard this story before. And it's such an important story to be told. And I want Randy now to kind of tell us what is he doing there? Why is this even on Randy's heart? Because
Sure.
honestly, this is in Africa, in the middle of the heart of Africa, and he going there, and he's going there for a reason. And I'm like, isn't that kind of hot and muggy and kind of a interesting place, a bunch of bugs and weird creatures and so forth? So, Randy, kind of tell us what's going on there.
Well, I don't know about bugs and interesting creatures. I'll tell you this: it's an amazing place with beautiful people, beautiful weather. But yeah, how did I get there? What's happening now? Well, part of this whole transformation of the country, education is a huge part of what the nation has decided needs to happen. What I mean by that is, in the decision that we're never going to go again, the leadership, the organization of the country highly prioritizes education and highly prioritizes integrity in everything that takes place. And so our national church, the Assemblies of God that we work with there, that Pastor Christine I told you about a few moments ago, after the genocide, she launched the church inside of her own home. This would have been the 1993, 94. They started the church because all of our churches have been burned down. They'd all been destroyed.
Yep.
And so she launched this church, and they started a school to train pastors and leaders. And so today there are somewhere over 180 to 190 Assembly of God churches that have been started and planted. However, doing amazing stuff, working together, doing their part. But there's a Bible school there. Part of I've been blessed in my journey. Went to Bible school, grad school, earned my doctorate in ministry and theology, and have taught a lot of pastors along the way. And when we were in Rwanda, we discovered we're planting churches, we're working with pastors, but there is a real need for the Bible school there. What I mean by that is this. Because education is so important, the government has stepped in and said, we want to make sure all professions inside the country have legitimate, academically accredited, strong degrees. And this is a really good thing. Lots of places in the world, especially in the two-thirds world, where you got some money, some time, you can set up and build a college, do something there. Like we've had that in the United States. You can't just say, I'm going to start doing college degrees and start a university in the States. You have to be accredited. You have to go through processes. Candidly, in Africa and some parts of the world, Latin America, Asia, that process has not been as strong. It's kind of like if you got the money and the energy, go for it. But Rwanda said no. Pastors, spiritual leaders must have fully accredited, recognized degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Part of this is to guard against outside cults and crazy people coming in the country. Mm-hmm. And so our Rwandan brothers and sisters have done an outstanding job. The challenge they have right in front of them is they didn't have anybody with the academic credentials. And so when I was there on another trip, I think we'll talk about later some other time, but we learned about this need, and what we discovered was it was a way that I could come alongside. And so for the next couple of years, I'm coaching, serving as an interim president of the Bible school in Rwanda there in Kigali, helping them establish a fully accredited Bible degree to train pastors and ministers there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, I think that's such an important piece because, I mean, people understand this. We're talking about a country that's choosing to forgive.
Yeah.
And they're wanting to make sure everybody understands how to forgive. I'm telling you, people, this is so important to really think through how, if we can model this, help them model do this here, we can pray that it will come to here to America and we would do the same thing.
Yeah.
Learn how to forgive. And maybe the Rwanda people will bring their missionaries here that teach us how they forgave each other when it was murder. I mean, it was murder, people. And they said, I forgive you. I'm telling you, people, if we don't understand what forgiveness means, if we forgive our murderer, I mean, I'll never forget the day where I had to forgive the murderer that killed my good friend. And I had to be on his sentencing day in court, and I said, you took this, you took this, you took this, you took this away. But the last thing I said, I forgive you. And I pray that I will see you in heaven. That's what the Rwanda people are doing. They're forgiving their enemy, and they're working together to build something incredible for the power of God.
Yep.
And I want to encourage you, if you have any opportunity to support this, because honestly, I know I'm going to be supporting this. God has been blessing me in ways that I can never imagine. I mean, but think about why I've done this whole month is to show you that it is not about how much money you have. Are you willing to be obedient with your tithes and your giving? And allow it to not just be 10%.
Yep.
Allow it to be something that God is able to take what you are given and tithing and to mold it in a way that it becomes more fruitful. I'm seeing it in this radio show is what got me to this point. There's an opportunity I might even get my own TV show. I mean, whoever thought, because I was obedient, that God would give me this opportunity. So when we come back from the break, we're going to tell you all about how you can support this, where you can go, and get all this detail. So we'll see you on the other side. Did you know I have another podcast I'm on? It's called Blind Level Tech. My co-host, Evan Tharn.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. It's good to see you.
I'm glad we both can't see each other. So, yeah, I guess it's good to see you.
Even though we can't see you. It's another beautiful day in the neighborhood, as you would say. Steal your quote directly.
Exactly.
It's a show dedicated to the use of technology from a blind and low vision perspective. So we cover anything from TVs and smart home appliances to the latest and greatest assistive tech or app updates, or we'll also have plenty of guests on there to talk about their technological experience and journey. So it's a geek show where geeks go to geek out, pretty much.
So everybody, you got to check out Blind Level Tech anywhere you get your podcast. I'll see you just in a second. Kelvin here. You know what degree Kelvin means? There's no negative in degree Kelvin, so there's no negative here. So let's go live without any negativity here. But all right, I don't like that intro, but we'll maybe work on a new one another day. But I got Randy Jumper here, and I finished my pottery piece, and it is awesome. I'm really happy with how it turned out, and you can definitely put in probably about 3 or 4 gallons of water in this water jug that I just made. Definitely need some handles so they can go down into the well and bring it back up. But I tell you, it's amazing how God works. And so I want to give you the opportunity to support Randy and what he's doing at the Bible College in Rwanda. So Randy, tell us, where can they donate? And by the way, all the links, everything that's talked about, will be in the description on YouTube, as well on the deafblindpottershow.com website. And so, and if you want to listen to this show today, you can watch it on YouTube at Deaf Blind Potter, as well. Watch it on deafblindpottershow.com, and then you can get the podcast at KHNC1360am.com, and that will get you the podcast if you want to be on the podcast. So Randy, where can they find your stuff and donating to the Rwanda project that you guys are building, the Bible College? So tell us where we can get all that.
Absolutely, and we really need some help. You can, the link is obviously in the description, like you said, but you can go to firstnlr.com/give and find the Rwanda project. It's pretty simple to see. It's there at the top. The reason why it's important is we got to get our pastors with these accredited degrees so they can pastor. We've had a little bit of a timeline where the government said, doesn't matter whether or not you've been pastoring for years or not, you need to get this degree. And so we're training pastors. Some of the requirements that we're having to do is we've got to build a dorm. They've got to be able to have housing. They've got to have, high-speed internet. I know it sounds crazy, but that's required by the government. And so we're putting those things in. And it's one of those things where it's everything from $362,000 is what we're raising right now to build the dormitory. And I bet there's a listener out there who could do that. But if you can't do that, we've got to outfit bunk beds, $200 for each bunk bed. $28.70 buys a mattress for a pastor who can't afford it.
Yeah.
$5 is currently what we're paying for textbooks. Hey, I got a kid in college right now. I would love it if I could buy a college textbook for $5.
Yep. Oh man, this is good stuff. I mean, I tell you guys, let's do this. Let's make this happen. And you know, all you guys in Colorado and my listeners out there and my YouTube watchers, you know that to live beyond our challenges means that we have to take a risk for us to persevere, to build a character that has hope in Christ. And I tell you guys, let's make this happen, and let's make this Bible College a reality. So, like I always say to wrap up every of my shows, go live beyond your challenges, and I'll see you next week. I want to tell you about my podcast, the Perseverance Podcast, where you as an individual can hear individuals persevere through their challenges that they have faced in their life. For example, the most famous Chippendale stripper and the #1 porn star in the world literally transformed his life and now is rescuing people from this industry and helping them find purpose in their life. Also, Casey Marsh, where she had a baby born without a brain and how she went through that grieving process. And lastly, one that's really fascinating is about Spencer Renfro, where he died and came back to life after driving 140 miles an hour. But when he died, he didn't come back alive the same. So you gotta go check out the Perseverance Podcast at perseverancepodcast.com and hear these stories and how people persevered through their challenges. Like I always say, go live beyond your challenges and go to perseverancepodcast.com. That wraps up the Deaf Blind Potter Show. Thanks for joining me, and share this video and encourage somebody to live beyond their challenges so that way we all can persevere through the struggles of life and overcome the challenges and have hope to live beyond our challenges. I'll see you next time.